The views and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media is strictly prohibited.
Well, we'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with our panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. And our panel will be discussing our topic. Our first question comes from Stephanie, who hails from Richmond, Virginia. And Stephanie asks, I know the panel hates talking about Trump, so I wanted to ask about what created the phenomenon of Trumpism and many of the other conspiracy theories that it seems Americans are subscribing to. What is the main driver that the panel thinks leads us into this mess? And so, Scott, I'd like to start with you regarding that. What are your thoughts on this?
She's obviously been listening because she knows Scott hates talking about Trump. So she's trying to do a roundabout there on you, Scott.
All right. Well, I mean, I'll take the bait in this particular case, but I'm gonna kind of segue into my own thing here, I think, because look, Trump was a celebrity in 2016. He had a reality TV show, I think, since 2004. And the rest of the country, I'm assuming, who doesn't know who Donald Trump is, the way that New Yorkers like myself do, probably thought that they were getting something other than what they were getting, which is, his act of being a successful businessman and a tough guy and all that kind of stuff. And that's not him at all. It's just an act that he puts on. I read this from a woman, Jenny from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, who wrote, I voted for him in 2016 and I had a Trump flag in the yard. I voted for him again in 2020, but this time I didn't put out the flag. I've been thinking about voting for him again because I don't like Biden's economy and I don't think Kamala will be any better. But after listening to his speech live at his rally, I'm actually afraid of Trump being president again. I don't know what he was talking about half the time. And it seems like maybe he was always like that, but it didn't seem so. And maybe he's getting worse and more unstable. And I think that that's a common thing as you get to know Trump, as you get to understand who he really is and who's behind the curtain there, you kind of see that he's not the person that he pretends to be. Look, he's caused a great deal of damage to this country. He continues to do that. This week, he did a political stunt, a cold-hearted political stunt with grieving families at Arlington Cemetery. Used these people as props in his drama. Actually his campaign got into a fight with the people at Arlington because they insisted on going to a part of the cemetery that's off limits to political campaigns and people who are, using it for tawdry purposes, which is exactly what he was doing. And I think that the more people see who he really is, and evangelicals, by the way, are also getting a big dose of that, right? Because this week he came out as being pro-choice and said, I'm going to do wonderful things for women. And Peter Wenner in Atlantic Magazine wrote an article about how evangelicals have lost their excuse to vote for Trump because he's not who he appears to be. I know he'll say anything to get elected. And he admits this. He says, first you have to get elected. Then you can do what you want to do. But you have to say what you have to say to be elected first. So do I believe that he's all of a sudden back to being the pro-choice person that he had been before? No, I don't. I think he's going to have desultory effects on the country. He's going to have doctors leaving red states in droves because they don't want to get stuck in this drama that's going on there. Abortions have actually gone up since 2022, since Dobbs. He's ineffective. He's thin-skinned. He's vulgar, and he's a user.
Well, I'm going to do everything I can to not talk about Trump. I'm going to go the other direction. And of course, the question is about the other conspiracy theories and, what the main driver of this is. I think it's the internet. I think that the internet provides a platform for the echo chambers that we've talked about so much, those safe spaces for people who have alternate ideas that maybe fly in the face of reality, where they can get some confirmation bias. And I think that that's a safe place for them. I've said this before. Anybody thinks that this is a new phenomena of Americans is wrong. They've always existed. Anybody that doesn't believe that, there are still people in the United States that believe in angels and that believe in the flat earth. And I think I actually used one of Scott's statements from last week, where Scott said it can't be a flat earth. If it was, all the cats would have knocked everything off the edge by now. That is so true. I was at a function, and a young lady is a flat earther, and she said, "Well, I could prove it to you." And she shows me a picture of the Earth, and I said, "You're showing me a two-dimensional picture of a three-dimensional object." Well, no. It shows a two-dimensional object. No, it doesn't. If I take a picture of you right now, and I took a picture of her standing there, you're in two dimensions. I could say that you're flat. And I can assure you this young lady was anything but flat.
Good to hear.
I mean, I'm sorry, the logic that you're using, but I do believe that the internet, and as the internet has grown and these new platforms are out there, and that includes True Social, that includes Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it, that includes, all of these different platforms. It allows people to get into that space, have a safe space to talk about the things that they could not talk about to rational people. They're talking about it to irrational people such as themselves, and they're confirming their own bias with information that is not based on fact. It is based on belief. And I think one of the, again, I've said this before on this podcast. I love the comment from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Science doesn't care what you believe. And the fact is that that's where we sit right now. We sit in a world where people do have this concept that belief trumps fact. And that's where these conspiracy theories, I mean, think about some of these things. This goes back to like the Salem witch trials, for cripe's sakes. I mean, it is that crazy. And this is the 21st century. We should be beyond this. We should be. And I've always said, human beings are the antithesis to Darwinism. We should have been eaten by wolves by now, because although we are clever, we're not very bright. And that's where all these things, these conspiracy theories, and in my mind, Trumpism is no more than a conspiracy theory. As Scott's pointed out, you're buying something that isn't real. And I too am a native New Yorker. I know, as Kamala Harris said, I know people like him. Well, I know people like him. I grew up around people like him, and they're used car salesmen. And that's really all I can say to it.
Well, I have one conspiracy theory to add, which I think is hysterical.
Oh boy, here we go.
That Trump chose RFK because he's hoping that he'll draw sniper fire from him. Nothing safer than being up there with a Kennedy.
That is so sad. And I also heard somebody put out in the news that he embraced RFK because he might want to replace J.D. Vance with him. We even have a certain date on that. Is 9/3, September 3rd. He will replace Vance with RFK.
Yep. So they're out there.
They are. I mean, just as many as all the people. I mean, really, there was this thing. I think it was down in Dallas, where these people gathered, hundreds of people gathered, because JFK was coming back to life, and was going to be Trump's running mate. I mean, The man's been dead since 1963, for cripe's sakes.
And with his son, by the way, with JFK Jr.
Right, who has also been dead for quite some time. But the fact that you could get a bunch of people, they should have shown up at that event with straitjackets and just started putting them in it and just taking them away because they have no sense of reality.
And look, on another more serious note, Fox has really played a big role in this,
Yes.
along with other right-wing media outlets, because let's face it, in 2016, according to exit polls, the number one issue for Trump voters to vote for Trump was illegal immigration. And Obama had gone through a very, very tumultuous time with illegal immigration, with unaccompanied minors showing up at the border. But he solved the problem. It was down to a 40-year low. That wasn't an issue. The economy was going well. And the second biggest issue was the economy. And because Fox doesn't tell its viewers anything good that Democrats are doing or anything that a Democratic presidential administration is accomplishing, they don't know about it. They didn't know that immigration was solved. They didn't know that the economy was roaring, 79 months of growth in a row. They just didn't know that. And so as soon as Trump became elected, he declared the economy is good. Immigration is going to be over. I'm going to build the wall. And he still insists that he built more of the wall than he actually did. The part of the wall he was standing in front of at a photo op on the border the other day was actually built by Obama, not Trump. The news outlets that people listen to, you can only be as smart as your information sources. Nobody can be smarter than that. And these people have really, really bad information sources.
And I will say that I find Fox News to be no different than the echo chambers you get on X and you get on Facebook and you get on the other places. Again, it is a safe place for people to go to, where they're going to hear what they want to hear, where they get their confirmation bias. And you're seeing people bail on Fox when, God forbid, one of the hosts has the audacity to actually speak the truth or change the narrative. So they're moving to places like OAN. They're moving to Newsmax and places like that because now Fox... And Trump has come out and said it's the Murdoch information empire, or however he put it. And yeah, that's I see that as all part of the same thing.
And I have a really good friend who's a Trump supporter and when I point out to him, Fox had to pay $800 million for lying about the election to Dominion voting systems. And I say to him, how could you listen to them when you know they're lying to you? And he says, well, don't you know that CNN and MSNBC are lying to you? I say, well, you know what? I can verify it. And if enough news sources that are reputable are reporting the same thing, I would say that, that's a pretty good indication that there's reality there. But I can still dive further into it than that by looking for other sources. But what you're seeing on Fox is blatantly a lie, and it comes from the beginning of Fox to now. What Fox is really all about, which was a wing of the Republican Party. And he said to me, I thought about it, and I like the lies I hear on Fox, and that's why I continue to tune in.
All righty.
Okay.
Thank
Wow.
you both. We'll see you again next time.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode. BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.